fact, we should ask a Republican member of Congress on Skype.
We'll do that.
We'll
do that. But first, we'll thank Galen Druk and Aaron Telmore for joining us. Come back again.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Appreciate having you guys back today, and we'll see you next time. Yeah, let's ask that Republican member of Congress. He's from he's a Republican member of Congress from Virginia. He's a member of the House Committee on Homeland Security. He's here to talk about cyber threats. Let's see if I can keep myself on track because I have had a problem today with that. Representative Tom Garrett Jr. from from Virginia. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, and it's a pleasure to be on.
Now tell us about your district real quickly.
The last segment we had your feed coming through.
Oh, okay. So we're going to talk about that because I want to badly, but because I'm really bad at getting off track today for some reason. Let's ask you a little bit about cybersecurity, cyber threats. That's been a discussion. My home state senator has had a lot to say about that. Richard Burr in North Carolina, on the head of the Intelligence Committee in the Senate, has talked about cyber threats and how the United States may not be prepared as much as it should be. Do you think we're prepared for the level of cyber threats that could be coming at us in the next several years?
Not remotely. Not even close to remotely prepared. We had a hearing the other day, I believe, the beginning of this week, end of last week, on progress made on mandates given to Homeland Security to address the cyber threat over 2 years ago. And there were 5 primary goals. They have met none of them. And in fact, one of the witnesses in the hearing said, we don't rest because our opponents don't rest. And my comment was, apparently you guys have rested 700 and some odd nights without getting this done. I queried as to whether anyone had been fired. The answer was no. I queried as to whether anyone had been responsible for these programs that weren't completed under law, had been promoted. They said that we don't know, but probably. There's no accountability in this realm. If you want worst case scenario, a cascading cyber attack against American infrastructure is estimated unclassified to be able to destroy the lives, kill 50 to 90% of the American population within 12 months. That is amazingly frightening. We're talking about low end 160 million Americans dying, and we are sleeping through this. Look, ultimately the measure of a plan is whether or not it stops or abates the threat. And there are 1,000 different ways we need to address this, but all isn't well as it relates to sort of what we need to do. This is a real threat. It emanates from Russia. It shouldn't matter what letter is beside your name with your willingness to say that. And so there's a bunch of things I'd like to do, but I don't want to sort of filibuster here. I'll kick the floor back to you guys.
Carrie had a question, but you touched on mine because part of mine was just getting a definitive answer as to whether or not you felt Russia meddled in the election, absent of what their motivation may or may not have been.
Sure.
Does it concern you at all that the president has yet to really acknowledge or embrace the fact that the CIA, the entire intelligence community, even people from his own party like yourself in Congress have said definitively that yes, Russia did try to meddle in our election this time, and does it bother you that he hasn't said that? Can we address this issue if the president won't acknowledge it?
Well, actually, he did. The Treasury Department.
I didn't ask you. I asked him. He's in Congress. You're not.
All right.
Go ahead.
Carrie, I got your back. No, I think as in the last 6 hours, we've essentially acknowledged Russian interference with the American power grid going back well into the last administration, something no one's ever done. In order to solve a problem, first you have to identify it, Clay, so you're spot on that. I do want to digress just for a moment into the nature of the Russian interference. I had the opportunity to have lunch with the foreign ministers from the Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. They and the Ukrainians sort of know about Russian meddling better than anybody. And what they said was that the pattern of Russian meddling that they've witnessed over years, one side or the other, but instead sowing and spreading a lack of confidence in democratic systems. And I think that's what we saw here. You've seen in the MSNBC reports, the Fox News reports across the political spectrum, that there were things that were done by Russians to help the Hillary campaign, to help the Trump campaign, but ultimately that it was about sowing chaos and distrust in our system. That's the sort of the modus operandi of the Russians. And I'll tell you this, there's been Russian meddling in American elections going back to at least the 80s, and I would argue to 1917. That doesn't make it right, and it doesn't mean we should look the other way. It does mean that we should follow Vandenberg's guidance that politics should stop at the water's edge. that we should be in the business of protecting Americans. And sort of the cyber threat is so broad because you've got the threat against the grid, for example, then you've got the threat against people's identities being stolen. So it goes from the individual level to the meta. And all of these things sort of fall into the same realm. And certainly the election interference falls somewhere between a devastating cascading cyber attack and threats against individuals, but they're all important. And our fundamental role as a federal government is to protect American citizens, and we're not doing that as well as we should be, period.
Right. Well, and Congressman, we did see the Trump administration and Treasury Secretary Mnuchin announce sanctions directly in response to the 2016 attacks on 5 Russian, I believe it was 5 institutions and 19 individuals, sanctions directly because of what happened in 2016 and because of cyber attacks, as well as the fact that, the president armed the Ukrainians in response to the Crimea invasion, whereas Barack Obama sent goggles. There's just a lot of other things that the president has done to show a robust response to Russia. I'd love to see more, too.
I'd love to hear a question.
Anyway, my question, we're going to pivot back to our earlier topic real quick while we have you, Congressman, as it relates to the elections in November. Are you worried about what happened in Pennsylvania, the 18th district, where there was that 20-point swing where President Trump had won by 20 points, and now it looks like the Democrat is positioned to win? Are you worried about a blue wave here in November?
Well, I mean, history is going to tell us that there should be seats picked up by the party out of executive power during the midterm off-year elections. I try not to worry about anything that I can't control. What I want to do is be the most forthright, best candidate I can. I'll bounce back to the last question and say, if Clay's point is the president should have done more sooner, I agree. So I've never tried. I neither attack the president ad hominem nor defend him as a sycophant, but try to be a fair arbiter. I think all these races come down to the individuals who are on the ballot, whether or not they communicate clearly, whether or not people share their ideas. I hope that our electorate, Republican and Democrat alike, will listen to the candidates with open minds. That's what this country should be about. So if I were a math guy and sort of a 538 prognosticator, certainly the Democrats ought to pick up some seats. It would be very interesting, and I don't think beyond the realm of possibility, to see Republicans lose seats in the House and gain seats in the Senate.
Well, then let me ask you this question. Let me give you the chance then, because you are in one of those districts that is, admittedly, well within, the swing, a swing district as it would be defined today. I think some years it might not be, but I think you're in a district that tends to go towards Republicans by 6 points or so. Parts of Northern Virginia. Certainly, you've got a race ahead of you this year. How do you convince those folks who might have those people in your district who might be thinking like those in Pennsylvania? How do you convince them that as a Republican you're able to be a check on the administration, to defend the rights that they feel like are being are at risk, to defend some of the things that the president says? How are you going to win this race, I guess, is my question. You've got a much tougher race ahead of you this year than I think you've had in the past. So convince me, if I'm a swing voter in your district, to stick with the Republican.
Sure. Well, it's not the Republican, it's me. And it shouldn't be the Democrat, it should be, Connor Lamb, right? We should be evaluating individuals who are on the ballot, not party labels and stereotypes. Things that I've done that I'm proud of before I ever got to the State House. We have a holiday recognizing civil rights hero Barbara Johns in Virginia because I filed the bill. The prohibition against non-traditional sex acts between adults that existed from the 1600s was abolished because I filed the bill and was the only patriot. I don't think the government has any role in the bedrooms of consenting adults. Okay, in Congress, I refused to support the AHCA Volume 1. I refused to support the National Defense Authorization Act until they would audit the DOD like they're supposed to under law, because I support defense spending but not defense waste. I've come at odds and loggerheads with this administration more than once. I will going forward, and I'll support them when I think they're right. But I have never, look, I'm going to bust my rear end to win, but if I don't win, God's got a plan for me somewhere else. Global human rights pull people out of critical countries and gain refugee status in America for people from places that were on the quote-unquote travel ban list. And that's not being a bunch of guys. That was me walking up a sidewalk to an embassy where American congressmen people hadn't been in nearly a decade to demand decent treatment of human beings, regardless of what they look like, who they love, how they worship, where they're from. It's my heart. And so I'll either get reelected or I won't. But if I don't, this office is a lot bigger than me. It's been around a lot longer than me. It's going to be around a lot longer than I am. And if what I haven't, done as a first-term member isn't good enough, then we'll go do something else. But it should always be the person on the ballot and not the party label.
Well,
we're starting to lose. We're starting to lose you, Congressman. The signal's breaking up. But I appreciate your. I do believe. I agree that people need to look at the person and not the party. This year, it may be a challenge to get folks to do that, and so I wish you. Strength in your campaign in 2018. Thank you so much, Congressman Tom Garrett of Virginia, for joining us. Please come back and see us. We'll have lots more to talk about.
Guys.
Thank you so much.